Hey everybody, DM Gallivant here, and today on Monster Monday we're going to continue our look at the monsters from the Critical Role Call of the Netherdeep sourcebook, this time looking at the Scholars of Allsight. Now, like the Library of the Cobalt Soul and the Consortium of the Vermilion Dream, the Allegiance of Allsight is a faction that is active in Matt Mercer's world of Critical Role known as Exandria. The Allegiance is an archaeological guild based in Ank'Harel that conducts research on ancient history and ruins. Now, as a group of researchers, you'll notice as you begin to look at them that they do have some similarities in their academic goals or their historical recovery of knowledge with groups from Strixhaven and with the Harpers of the Sword Coast. So I would suggest that if you want to extract the Scholars of Allsight from the Critical Role setting and use them in your own setting, you could sort of mix in and influence some of the aspects of the Harpers from the Sword Coast and some of the aspects of some of the schools from the Strixhaven setting, if you wanted to do that. Now, according to the Critical Role wiki, the Allegiance of Allsight has been mentioned in 2 of Matt Mercer's online games. Now, in Season 1 of Critical Role, in the session entitled A Traveler's Gambit, and in Season 3's A Dance of Deception, they both made an appearance. However, it seems that the timeline given in the Season 1 game was a parallel echo of Exandria from the version that is published in the Call of the Netherdeep. And the reason I say that is basically the 2 settings are about 400 years apart, and in the later setting, which I believe was the Season 1 Critical Role game, it said that they had been around for only a few years, but in the Call of the Netherdeep, which is set 400 years earlier, it is said that the Scholars of Allsight were well established. Just like everything else in D&D, don't ever try to rely on Wizards of the Coast or the original creators for an exact timeline of everything. Your table, your game, you make up the timeline that makes sense for how you want to use it. All right? That's all I'm having to say here. So now let's look at how the Scholars of Allsight appear in the Netherdeep campaign itself. They are the organization that is said to have discovered ruidium in the first place, and ruidium is the mineral that corrupts creatures that spend too much time handling it and that permeates the entire demiplane of the Netherdeep. So the PCs will first encounter scholars from the Allegiance of Allsight when they travel to Bazaxan earlier in the campaign. And once the action moves over to Ank'Harel, the Allegiance of Allsight is one of the factions that PCs can join to help them discover the meaning of the artifact that they or their rivals found at the end of the first chapter. Now, these scholars are allied with the monastics of the Cobalt Soul and oppose the occultists of the Vermilion Dream, 2 of the other factions that we've already seen. So, just like in the setting of the Sword Coast, as you are prepping for this campaign, you'll see that these various different factions all have their own goals, and in some cases, those goals are a little bit aligned, but in other cases, they are in opposition. So you just want to make sure that within the context of the campaign itself, you're keeping them consistent with what the notes offer you there. Let's take a look at the descriptions of the various different scholars from Allsight. We are shown 3 of the scholars in the campaign itself. And the first one we have is the scholarly agent. The scholarly agents are low-ranking members of an academic organization. They know a few tricks to help them avoid danger, and they study magic that enables them to decipher secrets of the past and identify magical relics. And the scholarly excavator is the second of the scholars that we meet. And field research is often dangerous work, especially when it involves ancient magic and monster infested ruins. Scholarly excavators are trained to deal with those dangers, adept at protecting their allies and clearing obstacles from their path. And last but not least, in the campaign, we meet the Scholarly Mastermind. And the Scholarly Mastermind are the formidable leaders of academic research organizations responsible for planning and carrying out operations that delve into the secrets of the past. Some masterminds are headmasters at academies or universities. Others operate individually and in secret, pursuing agendas that might diverge wildly from those of the rest of their organization. All right, now we will look a little bit at what we learn about the lore of the scholars of Allsight and then tactics that you could use with each one of these particular monsters. So, the Allegiance of Allsight is a scholarly faction that operates primarily within the Marquesian metropolis of Ankaral. Though most members of the Allegiance are academics unfamiliar with combat, the faction's field agents are skilled archaeologists who are also trained to contend with and overcome the threats that lurk in the depths of Exandria. Now, looking at the individual scholars and how you would use them in combat, if you have an agent and you're going to throw your party up against an agent, given the time before combat, the agent is going to cast mage armor on him or herself and may use dancing lights throughout combat to distract or confuse enemies. When possible, the agent will try to attack from range with arcane shock and will only use the melee version of arcane shock when absolutely necessary. Now let's take a look at the excavator. If the excavator knows its surroundings, it may use a thunderous warhammer attack against a pillar or other structure that could collapse debris onto or in front of its enemies to damage or delay them. Now, if two excavators are in the same battle, coordinate one to use its telekinetic toss power as the other one collapses a bit of wall or ceiling onto the adversaries. If the mastermind spots adversaries before battle, use alter self to change its appearance to delay, to deceive, or to confuse them. Mage armor is a must when combat is inevitable. And Arcane Shock is the heavy hitting range and melee attack, and then the fallback would be Dagger of the Poison Mind if lightning damage seems resisted or ineffective against its foes. Alright, as we've seen with these other factions, the creature type given in the campaign is humanoid. As I have suggested, I think that we're eventually going to see as part of the playtest for 1D&D these humanoid-like monsters that have a class tag and change to be any playable race. So I think if you wanted to take one of these scholars of all sites and put it into your own homebrew setting and you wanted to run it as a plasmoid, let's say, I don't think there would be any problem with that. I think you could do that. Even though the plasmoid is an ooze, it would be fine to run this as a plasmoid instead of a humanoid. Let's look at the actual stat blocks for the monsters that are given, and we'll also imagine a higher level, you almost might say warlord, but not quite warlord, for this entire organization. And I'll let you know why I'm basing it on a warlord when we get there. The scholarly agent is a medium or small humanoid with a wizard tag of any alignment. Armor class 11 or 14 with mage armor, 48 plus 4 hit points, speed of 30 feet, initiative plus 1. Has a little bit higher than average stat block with intelligence, as you would imagine, being the highest stat. Saving throws, it gets a bonus on intelligence, and skills, it gets arcana, history, and investigation. Passive perception, 11, and 2 languages common plus 1 other. Challenge rating is 1, proficiency bonus plus 2. It has the arcane shock, that is a melee or ranged spell attack plus 5 to hit, reach of 5 feet or range of 30, and the damage is 2d10 plus 3 lightning damage. If the target is a creature, it can't take reactions until the start of its next turn. So then it also has spell casting, and the agent casts one of the following spells, so using intelligence as a spell casting ability. So it'll do Dancing Lights or Mage Hand at will. Then once a day, it can do Comprehend Languages, Identify as an action, and Mage Armor. And then its reactions, it gets a Glyph of Shielding, so it can add 2 to its AC against one attack that would hit it. Now, note it can do that whether it has the Mage Armor up or not. So if it's running Mage Armor and you do Glyph of Shielding, then its armor class becomes 16. So the only stipulation is the agent must be able to see the attacker and must have a free hand. Now let's look at the Scholarly Excavator. Again, this is an enemy suitable for a Tier 1 party, this time a Level 2 party. The Scholarly Excavator is once again a medium or small humanoid or playable race of any alignment. It doesn't have spell casting, so it's not considered a wizard. The armor class is 16 with breastplate, 98 plus 27 hit points, speed of 30 feet, initiative plus 2. The stat block again is a bit above average, a little bit better than the across the board than the agent, I would say. But this time the bonus is on Constitution, or the high stat is on Constitution. And the saving throw bonuses are Constitution and Intelligence. Skills are Arcana, Athletics, and History. Has a passive perception of 12, and it gets common in 2 additional languages, CR3, and proficiency bonus of +2. Now, it is a siege expert, so the excavator deals double damage to objects and structures. For its actions, it gets multi-attack with 3 thunderous warhammer attacks. So it may not be a high CR, but it gets to hit a lot of times during combat. That thunderous warhammer is a melee weapon attack, +4 to hit, and reach 5 feet, one target for 1d10 plus 2 thunder damage, or double that damage against objects and structures. And then it has a bonus action of a telekinetic toss, which recharges on a 5 or 6. Now, the excavator targets one medium or smaller creature or an object weighing 300 pounds or less that isn't being worn or carried. Target, which must be within 30 feet of the excavator and visible to it, is magically pushed up to 20 feet horizontally in a direction of the excavator's choice. The target is a creature, can make a DC 13 strength saving throw to resist the effect, and is not pushed on a successful save. When we were talking about the tactics of using multiple excavators, this is what we were saying. One of them could do a telekinetic toss to push an enemy into an area where another one was about to hit a pillar and collapse part of a ceiling or a wall or something like that onto those enemies. Now, the last of the scholars that are introduced in the campaign itself is the scholarly mastermind. And once again, this is only suitable to throw at a tier 1 party, this time level 3. So, as a group, these are all relatively weak monsters, and that may be a little bit disappointed. So, that's why I went ahead and made another level to this. But we'll look at that shortly. The Mastermind itself is a medium or small humanoid with the wizard tag, can be any alignment. Armor class is 12 or 15 with mage armor, 15d8 plus 15 hit points, speed of 30 feet, initiative +2. Now it has, again, a little bit above average stat block, with the high stat being intelligence. The saving throws are intelligence and wisdom. Skills are Arcana, History, Insight, and Perception. Passive perception is 16, and now it gets 4 languages, so Common and 3 others. Challenge rating is 5, proficiency bonus is +3. Now it gets multi-attack, so it makes 2 Arcane, Shock, or Dagger of the Poison Mind attacks. Now, Arcane Shock is a melee or ranged attack. Notice it has the same name, but slightly different characteristics than the Arcane Shock uh, of the agent. So this time it's a +7 to hit, reach 5, or range 60 feet. One target and deals 4d10 +4 lightning damage. The target is a creature. It can't take reactions till the start of its next turn. And then Dagger the Poison Mind is a melee or ranged weapon attack, +7 to hit, reach 5 feet, range 20 or 60, one target. Now it deals 1d4 +4 piercing damage, +10 psychic damage. So the target is a creature. It must succeed on a DC 15 wisdom saving throw or be frightened until the end of its next turn. Now, this one, I want to point out two things about the Dagger of the Poison Mind. First of all, it does not specify in the attack that it requires an actual physical dagger. However, it does say it's a weapon attack. And so I think that would lead us to imply that you have to have a physical dagger. Also, the artwork shows these monsters with daggers. So I'm going to say that you would probably want to have this thing fling an actual dagger and have that attack be part of it. Now, the dagger doesn't have to be magical or anything. All of the effects of the psychic damage can just be part of what is imbued to the dagger by the mastermind. But that's kind of the way I would run it if I were running one of these monsters. Now, spell casting, Mastermind casts one of the following spells requiring no material components and using intelligence as a spell casting ability. So, at will, it can do alter self, which is pretty interesting because that means at will it can just change its not just its appearance, but its physical form to another humanoid that is relatively the same size. Light, and Mage Hand. And once per day, it can do Comprehend Languages, Mage Armor, and Zone of Truth. All right, so those are all relatively low level monsters, and the only ones that get introduced as members of this faction in the actual campaign itself. But it seems kind of weird to have a faction whose top tier members are only a challenge for tier 1 adventurers, especially since this campaign goes up to higher levels. Why don't we imagine maybe there is someone in the background, someone in the shadows that is kind of directing the activities of all of these scholarly agents? Remember the old saying, knowledge is power? What if someone is trying to accumulate knowledge for the purpose of accumulating power? Perhaps a warlord? Perhaps not quite a warlord. How about a scholarly Lorelord? Now, this is a tier 3 monster suitable to go against your level 11 party. And it's medium or small playable race with the wizard tag, typically lawful neutral. Lawful because they want to be the law, neutral because you could set this person up as opposition to the BBEG in your campaign, or you could have this be the BBEG in your campaign, depending on how your story arc is planning to go. So armor class is 14 or 17 with mage armor, 18 d10 plus 54 hit points, a speed of 30 feet, CR 16, proficiency bonus plus 5. The stat block is again elevated with intelligence being the highest stat. Attack bonus is plus 6, damage bonus plus 1. So the Scholarly Lorelord makes 2 arcane shock attacks. It can substitute a spell for one of those attacks. It also makes a telekinetic blast attack if the power is available. So Arcane Shock, melee or ranged attack, plus 10 to hit, reach 5, range 60, one creature, 4d10 plus 5 lightning damage. And spell casting, the Lorelord casts one of the following spells requiring no material components and using intelligence as the spell casting ability, spell save of DC 18. So at will, it can do Alter Self, Mage Hand, Dancing Lights, and Prestidigitation. 2 times a day, it can do Charm Person, Mage Armor, Sending, and Fireball. Once a day, it can do Dominate Person and Dimension Door. So now with this one, you can study the party by using the Alter Self, um, and you can then maybe figure out what the strengths of the party are, and maybe if you have a physically imposing party member, but one that doesn't have great mental defenses, you could then try the dominate person on them. And you could then use that for whatever purpose you wanted. You might dominate them out of combat and use them to steer the party more in the goals of the scholarly Lorelord. Or if they're if it comes to a fight, you might wind up using the dominate person to then turn that character in the party against everybody else. So the telekinetic blast, a recharge of 5 or 6, Lorelord creates an explosion of magical force in a 20-foot radius sphere centered on a point it can see within 120 feet of itself. Each creature in that area must make a DC 18 dexterity saving throw. On a failed saving throw, the creature takes 8d6 force damage and is knocked prone. On a successful save, it takes half as much damage and is not knocked prone. And it's immune to both force and lightning damage, has magical resistance, has advantage on saving throws against spells and other magical effects, and then it also gets a version of the glyph of shielding. So the Lorelord this time will add 4 to its AC against one attack that would hit it. So in this case, if the mage armor is up and it uses glyph of shielding, its armor class would become 21 temporarily. All right, and that is going to do it for our look at the Scholars of Allsight. I have been DM Galabon. This has been Monster Monday, and if you've been watching this far, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like the video, share the video, and click the post notification bell so that you get notified every time new content drops. Now, I do have some other live stream games that I run normally every week. Right now, mainly due to scheduling challenges on my part, those games are happening less frequently than weekly. But within the next couple of months, we should get back to a normal weekly rhythm on these. The Sunday game right now is on a season break. So we're not playing that on Sundays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. But you can find all of the Walker of Waterdeep archives on the YouTube channel right here. Now that is a planeswalking game using 5th edition D&D rules, and we're visiting many different planes that are inspired by and based on the locations out of the Magic the Gathering card game. And the monsters they fight are all from that game, mostly from that game. And the storylines are oftentimes woven in with the fictional stories from those particular campaigns. But they have their own goals, their own story that they are trying to achieve, but we are telling that by visiting these different settings. Then on Wednesday nights, we have the Sword Coast Chronicles. That's not going to happen this week because there's a midweek soccer game that I will be attending. That is Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. That is a 5th edition game where we are telling a homebrew story, but we are using the 5th edition published campaign storylines as a way of getting to, of telling each arc of this homebrew story. So we're diving in and out of the various published campaigns. Right now, we are in the Tomb of Annihilation storyline, and that happens Wednesdays, 8 p.m. Eastern. Then Saturday night we go old school. We go all the way back to 2nd edition D&D, for Saturday Night Greyhawk. And we are playing through the original Temple of Elemental Evil in that game using second edition rules. I believe we might be playing on Saturday night at 7:30. I don't think there's a home game this week. There's been so many darn games um, lately that it's just crazy. I'm really angry at FIFA for moving the World Cup to the winter because that means that all the soccer leagues are having to compress their seasons toward the end of the year, and it's just disrupting a lot of my D&D games because I paid for the season tickets, so I want to be in the stadium when the team is playing. All right, that is Saturday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, all the live streams themselves happen over on the Twitch channel, which is twitch.tv/Galabond, but all of the archives of these shows are over here on the YouTube channel. And we do have a Patreon over at patreon.com/DMGalabond in case you want to help us out with creating more content. Now, next time, we are going to take a step away from the Call of the Netherdeep campaign, and we are going to look at a classic monster by viewer request. And that is, we're going to be looking at the Oytughs and the kind of fun that you can have with Oytughs in your campaign. All right, I have been DM Galabon. This has been Monster Monday. As always, I'll remind you to watch out for the monsters under the bed. Good night, everybody.